post called for a volunteer to attempt to pick up. And I was right there, I was directly over the runway, and I figured, well, I'm the logical one to do it. It's my turn, so I went in. At that time, I was at 9,000 feet, and in a 270-degree turn, I lost the 9,000 feet in a steep dive and turn. And I rolled out about 1,000 feet from the end of the runway and was able to touch down on the first 100 feet of the runway. And I rolled through mortar holes and shell holes and over unexploded ordnance and all that stuff, and it was lucky. It came to a stop, just absolutely opposite where these three guys they ran out in the ditch. And I remember saying to Major Campbell, who was actually the flight check pilot, but he was acting as co-pilot at that time, said to him, I wish these guys wouldn't run directly towards the airplane because I can turn it faster than they can run. As a big mistake. They could run a lot faster than I could turn that airplane. Anyway, they got on board, and I had it all arranged that that I was not going to shut down the auxiliary jets because that would, or reverse the props, because that would shut down the auxiliary jets. And I just stopped with brakes, and Major Campbell was to reconfigure the airplane for takeoff. Ed Trejo, the flight engineer, was to make sure he kept the engines running while on the ground. Manson Grubbs, who was the loadmaster, his job was to get those three guys on board. And I was looking back to see when they got on board, when Campbell called out, "Oh my God, look at that!" And somebody, one of the North Vietnamese, had fired a 122 millimeter rocket directly at the airplane, and it broke in half and came to a stop right in front of the nose wheel. It didn't go off, and if it had, you would have been interviewing a different guy today, I'm sure. Anyway, when they got on board, I taxied around that rocket back on the runway. We applied power, and during started takeoff, and I guess we had only been out of that spot for maybe 7 or 8 seconds when it kind of erupted with mortar fire, and we got out of there okay. Climbed up to about 5,000 feet, where we was out of the range of the anti-aircraft fire, and flew on back to Da Nang, got back in there. You know, everybody has to develop their own leadership style. If you want to talk about the attributes of a leader, you can go to the Boy Scout laws, and that's a very good listing of the attributes of a leader. But you'll find that there's some excellent leaders that have very few of those attributes, but they just have a knack of being a leader. Like you know, General Patton, he was a rough, gruff old guy, but his men knew that, and they knew that he was a pretty smart guy, and they would follow him anywhere. Hap Arnold was a different guy. He was smooth, but his leadership was more or less working with the Army brass and with the Congress to get the Air Force to be a separate service, and that's one of his major contributions. Omar Bradley, he was another smooth operator, very good. He looked after his men, took care of them, but he was smart, and he was a good leader and a good tactician. You study any of them, and you'll find that they have 1 or 2 major attributes that have made them a good leader, like Eisenhower. Eisenhower was in the plans of the Army staff when he was plucked out of the group, and advanced because he was a good leader. He was a good planner, was his major attribute. And so you just study the generals and see what they did and try to emulate the guys. But one thing you should always remember, your first duty is to look after your men. Your second duty is to train those men. And the third thing you should think about doing, if you're in a position of command, as soon as you get in that position of command, get a guy that shows promise and start training him to replace you. The first one was the armory at Newman, Georgia. It was named for Steve Pless and myself, and it's called the Steve Pless Armory. Then the highway going out of Newnan over to Jonesboro, there's a 10-mile stretch there. It's called the Colonel Joe Jackson Medal of Honor Highway. In addition to that, the city of Newnan, Georgia has put up a granite monument. It's just a big square rock with our name and Medal of Honor stuff inscribed on it. And here in this area, the main street at McCord is now called the Colonel Joe Jackson Boulevard. There was a C-17 that was named for me. It's got my name and the replica of the Medal of Honor on the side of it. And then there's a bridge here in Kent that was named for me. It was dedicated either last summer or last fall, I've forgotten which. Anyway, it's on 228th Street here in Kent, where it comes from downtown up to the West Hill. And it's a bridge over the Green River, and it's got my name on it.